Yeah, so my name's Doug Gordon. I'm the co-host of a podcast called The War on Cars, which is a kind of tongue-in-cheek title. Usually when people say there's a war on cars, they're the people who are complaining about losing parking or privilege for drivers. We sort of appropriated that culture war phrase and turned it into the title of our show. And we cover everything related to transportation and mobility and public space and sort of all the problems that cars have created in cities and society and the environment. And we approach that from every angle, politics, pop culture, science, all kinds of stuff. So we try to take a pretty broad view of of the car as a big factor in global society. Right. Yeah. And we keep building highways and car-centric places. So it's and with all the other issues, politics, climate, et cetera, it's not going away. Yeah, we when we started it in 2018, we really felt that nobody was covering the car as this huge determinative force in um, not just American society and politics, but really the world. I mean, there's really no consumer product or invention in history that has had as much an impact on the shape of our environment and our cities as automobiles. Um, and it determines everything about where we live, how we get around, obviously, and how we interact with other people. So we felt that really taking a look at the car from all angles was a needed discussion, sort of in the podcasting and news space. Yeah, we have a book coming out. It's called Life After Cars, and it is about all of these people and ideas and elected officials and ordinary activists who are taking on cars and car-centric planning, and trying to make the world a little better where they live. So yeah, we're really excited for that one to come out. Oh yeah, for sure. That's good. I grew up mostly north of Boston in a suburb. Grew up on a cul-de-sac. We really had to drive or be driven everywhere when I was a kid. Um, I've lived in New York now for almost 30 years, so it's been my home. I've also lived in Atlanta where I owned a car and drove to work every day. So I kind of know both both sides or all aspects of like living in the US and what it means to be car dependent, but also how living car free can be so much better if that's what you prefer. Yeah. Where did you grow up? Okay. Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, it depends where you grew up, I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, yeah. Yeah. It's funny, I don't actually remember, I'm certainly going to like visiting New York or going into Boston when I was a kid. You certainly saw graffiti. That was a big issue when I was growing up. But I don't remember stickers. I do wonder, now there's like a real maker culture out there, right? There's Etsy and people selling all kinds of local stuff. And there's so many, just because of the internet, so many companies available now to upload your artwork and get a sticker going. Hold on just a second. My son just walked in, so hold on. So I think that certainly is a big difference between, the 80s or 90s or early 2000s and today. It's so easy now and inexpensive to get your designs uploaded, printed, and distributed rather quickly. No, I think you had to go to like a stationery store or like a like greeting card kind of store or like school supplies, that kind of stuff. Um, Stickers as like a form of political statement were just like I said, I think there was graffiti for sure, but you didn't see a lot of stickers. They can be. Certainly here in New York, you see all manner of political statements on stickers from, people protesting what's happening in Gaza to folks commenting on local elections, like here in New York City with the mayoral election, um, environmental causes. You see anti-Trump stickers, anti-Elon Musk stickers. So yeah, absolutely. I think they're a form of political expression just like any other. Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, I'm a local advocate for sure. We have a strong point of view on the war on cars. We don't hide that. It's right there in the title. And we just I think unlike a lot of other, let's say a lot of other news outlets or whatever, we just wear our bias on our sleeve where you can see it. But there's certainly a pro car, pro status quo bias in a lot of the rest of the media. So yeah. I mean, they're inexpensive. People really love them. We have, I think a big difference now between 20, 30 years ago, let's say, are laptops. People put them all over their laptops or their water bottles. So there's that piece of it as well. They're just kind of like a fun, easy thing to sell. And we support the podcast a few different ways. Patreon support, advertising, but we also sell merchandise. And, we sell t-shirts and that kind of stuff. But those are 25, $30. Stickers, you can buy a set or they're $2 each, right? So if you want to like easy way into buying merch and supporting the podcast, that's a good way to do it. That they also carry a somewhat political message, like our Cars Ruin City stickers, is I think part of what makes them kind of fun. It's I wouldn't put one above the other. It all sort of fits together. It's like here's an easy, inexpensive piece of merch that we can sell to listeners and supporters. So there's that. They also become marketing for the show itself. They're almost like a little business card that you can hand out to people. Or when people post pictures of where they've put their stickers on social media, that helps spread the message of the podcast, sometimes more than people just walking by the stickers themselves. So I think it's kind of all of the above is the answer. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. That's really funny. Yeah. Yeah, and people just randomly see them. I mean, I would think 99% of people walk by stuff like that in a city and ignore them or don't even see them because they're just part of the background. But every now and then people do see them, stop, take a picture, tag us. So, we do see it getting noticed every now and then. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. We at the War on Cars understand that this is a systemic issue. If you live in a place where you need a car to get around, that's not your fault. That's the result of decades upon decades of decisions by people far above you, city planners, governors, mayors, federal elected officials. And so everybody exists within the confines of a system, and you have to work and adapt and build your life in that. So again, if you live in a place where you need a car to get to work, to get groceries, that's not your fault. Um, I think you can see by the demand and price of, urban real estate, trying to buy an apartment in Chicago or San Francisco or New York City, that there is demand for walkable places um, where you don't need a car for every trip. And what we're trying to do with the war on cars is to say, again, we're not going to fault the individual for the system they live in, but we at least want you to see that cars are not inevitable. They didn't win out in a fair fight. They were pushed on us by lots of different interests, oil companies, car companies, different lobbying groups, and that there are alternatives that can make everything about your life better. Again, that's not to say you have to be completely anti-car or completely pro-car, but there is some space in the middle where, a car to me is a tool. If you need to drive, if you need to get from Chicago to New York, you fly probably because that is the easiest, fastest, and least expensive option. Um, if you need to get from your neighborhood in Chicago to the corner grocery store, you'd be insane to fly there, right? That would because that is not the right tool for the job. And that's how we see cars. There is a time and a place where they make complete sense. But it's kind of nice if you just need to pick up like a dozen eggs to not have to get into a $50,000 3-ton vehicle and burn half a gallon of gas to get there. When if you're able, you could just walk or bike or take a scooter or a bus. um, that's what we want you to see. It's not us forcing an ideology on anyone. It's just we need to start questioning this system that we've all grown up in and that we kind of take for granted as almost like part of nature. Cars are not part of nature. They're design choices. They're political choices. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, sure. I think the biggest thing we like to talk about on the War on Cars is just if your city comes to your block and says, we want to put a bus lane in or we want to put bike parking in, we would hope that people aren't against those things because while you personally might not use that, there are lots of people around you who will. Chicago is a good example. It's a very busy bike share system. By American standards, a very good public transit system, which is under a lot of challenges right now, I know. Um, I think what we want people to do is really just to start to see cars as a thing and also see that, yeah, younger generations especially, but people all over the world are questioning this system and saying, I don't want to be laden with hundreds of dollars in car payments every month and insurance, and I don't want to be subject to the vagaries of gas prices, what a bunch of people in the Middle East or elsewhere in the world decide a barrel of of oil, sorry, should be worth from day to day. Um, and that there is a better way. And that I think what we're doing at the War on Cars is we're making a pro-freedom argument. And that's how I see our movement in general. Um, Being an American, we like to really say that we have freedom, and freedom usually means that you have choices, that you can live your life however you want, so long as you're not harming other people, people will leave you alone. Um, but in most of the country, you don't have much of a choice when it comes to mobility. It's a car or nothing. And I live in the city, and um, I feel that I have tremendous freedom. I have multiple subway lines within a short walk of my apartment. I have a bus just a half a block away. I have my own bicycles that I can use. I have bike share. I can walk. And to me, those options altogether make me feel like I have just so much more freedom than when I lived in the suburbs, north of Boston. And my children have so much more freedom than I had as a kid because they can walk everywhere to see friends. They're not dependent on a parent driving them. Yeah, so I think that's sort of what we're trying to do with the podcast and with the book is that if you think about a life after cars, it can be a much more free life. Um, if you think about the ways in which we're going to fight climate change, often it's seen as sacrifice, living with less, burning fewer fossil fuels, eating less meat, things like that. But I think when you ride a bicycle or you get rid of your car and you take transit and you walk, it's like it's adding so much to your life. So that's what we're trying to do. It's like there's just such a better world out there with fewer cars, including a better world, I should say, for drivers. That if you need your car, you're disabled, you have mobility issues, you're elderly, you should want all of your neighbors to not have a car because they are the ones who are preventing you from finding a parking space. They are the ones who are preventing you from moving through traffic quickly. So, freedom means freedom for all people, including people who need a car, I would say. Yeah. Yeah, sure. It's a little bit of advertisement. I mean, I think in any political movement, the hardest thing to do is to convince other people to get active or to convince other people that they are not alone in their feeling that something isn't quite right. Um, and that there's something that you can do about it, and that there are other people like you who will help you do something about it. So let's say you are walking through a neighborhood in Chicago and you think, oh man, the traffic here is just horrendous. It's loud. There are cars blocking every crosswalk. I'm breathing in all this exhaust. And you yourself intuitively understand that this system isn't working for you or for anyone. You might think to yourself, but what can anyone do about it? Look at all of this. It's just the way things are. And then you see a sticker that says cars ruin cities, or you'd be happier biking, or the war on cars, and you think, huh, there's somebody else out there who thinks like I think. And before too long, maybe you start looking into your local advocacy organization or going to meetings or having conversations with people, and you realize you're not alone. And so I think spreading the message, any political message for any cause, any way you can, is a way of rallying the troops and getting people who think they're, maybe a little weird or think a little differently than other people to understand they're not weird and that there are more people who think like them than don't. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, Chicago is interesting too because you do have the grid, but you also then have all of those diagonal streets that cut through the grid, and then you have where they come together, you can be crossing the street and have cars coming in like three or four different directions at once. and it can feel very dangerous. And so, and very chaotic. And it's, yeah. And I know Chicago is doing a lot here and there to fix some of that stuff and make it safer for everybody, but it's still got a long way to go, like a lot of places. I mean, it depends, right? Like New York, Manhattan is a little unusual because we just have this like huge grid that once you get sort of above lower Manhattan really is. But we have Broadway, right? That like cuts through part of the grid and creates a few weird diagonals. We have, and in I live in Brooklyn, which has various gridded neighborhoods, but then has like Flatbush Avenue and Atlantic Avenue that cut through those and create these weird angles. It really depends on sort of when your city grew up. Boston was laid out, you know, in the 1600s and 1700s. And so they have all these like meandering, winding streets, and narrow streets in certain parts of the city. And then you have, Las Vegas or, Houston, which is just are different beasts altogether. So it just depends on where you're from. Yeah, New York was largely built before cars, Boston, San Francisco, but and Chicago too. Uh, but the suburbs of those places and other cities like Atlanta or Las Vegas, Los Angeles came up with a car, right? So it's just different. Yeah. Yes. I will say one thing that we I've been talking about with people is that we're this is probably like the larger point of like putting up stickers. We haven't touched on the fact that it's actually generally illegal. It's considered like defacing public and private property. First of all, we tell people never put the stickers on people's private property, like never slap them on a car or someone's private property or home. But technically, it's an illegal act. It's like graffiti. Um, and I will say that we are in an age where we're seeing certain things happen in Washington and the looming growth of authoritarianism, where what is legal and what is right are not always the same thing. And people in an age where protest is possibly going to become incredibly important over the next few years, like you kind of have to flex the muscle of doing things that make you a little uncomfortable and that might even be illegal. If you want to get your point across, if you want to build a movement. And people putting up stickers that say like Free Palestine or, F Trump or Cars Ruin Cities or, don't buy a Tesla. Um, that's a way of flexing that muscle. It's a low stakes way of flexing that muscle. You're probably not going to get arrested, but it's still technically illegal. So yeah, that's the piece I think we hadn't hit on in this. Yeah, right, right. Yeah, it's a little transgressive, right? That's the idea. Mhm. Yeah, the war on cars is fine. Yeah, yep, yeah. 51. Yeah, nice to talk to you, Caleb. Good luck. Send me with, whatever you wind up doing. Please feel free to send along. Yeah, we're happy to see it. Thanks. Bye.